I would encourage people to move towards the front of the room. We won't bite, so if there's any seats, fill them in. And there are lots of great snacks and refreshments over there, so please help yourself, enjoy. So thank you all for coming today. My name is Devin Rodriguez. I'm the Economic Development Specialist for the city. And we're really excited about this, and we hope that you all get some good information, good ideas, energized after today. I want to introduce our council member, Jeannie Bruins is here. So thank you very much, Jeannie, for coming today. And we're fortunate enough to have Michele Reeves here today to provide us with this presentation, the building blocks for a successful Auburn Boulevard commercial corridor. And in the last 2 days, Michele has done we did a walking tour of Auburn, really almost walked, I think, the whole 2 mile stretch, 2 mile stretch of Auburn. And then she did interviews with numerous business and property owners, and some of you participated in those. Thank you very much for doing that. So this is all of ideas on what we can do starting tomorrow to improve Auburn Boulevard. Michele is an urban strategist with significant private sector experience revitalizing districts. Her 16 plus years in real estate have included working on public-private partnerships, marketing unknown or undesirable districts, pre-development consulting, siting manufacturing facilities, strategizing acquisitions and development with private sector investors, and creating retail leasing plans. Michele founded Civilist Consultants to assist commercial district businesses and large public sector organizations to recognize and leverage their strengths, accomplish economic development goals, and craft their unique stories to create compelling, multifaceted brands. And that's what she's going to help us do today. Because Auburn Boulevard, definitely what we learned yesterday, has a lot of unique stories that we need to make sure we share. Michele has a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. So please welcome Michele.
Thank you, Devin. So I'm a person who uses my outside voice all the time inside, so I always have to modulate for a microphone so I don't blow everybody's eardrums out. So I want to start with just a little bit of gratitude. So first I want to thank SACOG for paying for and sponsoring this work, and Greg is here, Greg Chu from SACOG, so thank you, Greg. And the Portland State Urban Sustainability Accelerator, which is also partnering with SACOG in this work in the region. I want to thank Casey and Devin for helping to arrange all of this and doing all the logistics and tagging along with me on everything. I want to thank everybody who was in the interviews yesterday, and then all of you for coming out today. So I really appreciate seeing all these faces here. I like to start presentations in a community I've never spoken in before with a little public service warning, which is I break 2 rules of public speaking. I talk way too fast, and I cover way too much material for the time that's given me. So hands and feet inside the car, we're going to be rolling pretty quickly. The other thing I want to say is I wrote a lot of this last night after the 2 days of work, so I'm going to be referencing my notes a little bit more than I might normally be in a presentation, so forgive me if I'm looking down a little too much. So this is what we're going to cover today, these 3 things. The first one is a doozy, and we're going to spend most of our time on it, and then we're going to talk about existing buildings and street dialogue. So I'm going to dive right in, and we're going to talk about corridor analysis. So when I'm working on a really long corridor, and this is a new remote, so I'm going to have to be careful that I'm not turning things off. So we've got a pretty long corridor stretch here. And you got to figure out, how do you analyze it? How do you break it down into pieces so that you can understand it and get your arms around it, and then make some smart decisions about what you have and what you want to do with it. So I'm going to kind of walk you through how I analyze corridors, and we're going to talk about some specific things that I found on Auburn that you guys might want to think about and use. So this is kind of the rough order that I look at when I'm looking at a corridor. I think about quantifying unique characteristics, strengthening nodes, and leveraging adjacency. So I'm going to start with quantifying unique characteristics. A road should always reflect the authentic identity of who and what surrounds it. So part of what was kind of lost in the suburban expansion of retail is that sense of interest and personality and engagement that happens on the street level. And that's part of what we need to bring back to Auburn Boulevard. So to get it back, corridors need to remember this fundamental lesson about the consumer experience, which is that the consumer experience happens long before they walk in the door of an individual business. And that is the cornerstone of almost everything that I'm going to talk about today. So everything on Auburn is contributing to your story. Your streetlights and your buildings and your sidewalks and your parking lots and your landscaping and your horses and all of your businesses. The people who are walking around your district, the kinds of things that are on your street, all of the signage you have, everything you have is contributing to your story. We were walking down the street and this gentleman insisted that I took his picture. So I said, I'm going to take it and you're going to be in a presentation tomorrow. So here he is. So these are the stories, the ones we see on the street that make us want to stay and hang out and spend time and be in a district. So how do we quantify these unique characteristics and these things to build off of and showcase in a district? So this is what I do. I break districts down into these three kinds of identities. And when I start working on a corridor, I sort of zoom out and look at sectional identity, and then we just zoom, in and look closer in over time at site identity. So we're going to start with sectional identity, and the first thing I kind of start on in sectional identity. Most long corridors naturally break up into different kinds of sections. So I look at all kinds of things: streetscape improvements, geographic features, businesses, uses, footprints, all kinds of different things to just see how this street might naturally break up into sections. So with Auburn Boulevard, we have a couple of different things going on just geographically. So the first is the freeway. So there's always a freeway is like a canyon, and there's always one side of the freeway and the other, and they never interconnect. So thinking you're going to create an identity across a freeway, never going to happen. The bend in the road. The bend in the road, whenever I have those, you also have two different sets of identities, and it's pretty hard to marry them together. So it's better, at least in the beginning and initially, to really create two separate sets of identities on those streets and focus on them as individual nodes. Streetscape was an obvious one, so there are parts of Auburn Avenue that have nice, sexy new streetscape, and there are parts that do not, so that's a natural thing that your eye notices when you're going through. Building footprints and uses, there were a couple things that immediately jumped out at me. So what is this right here? It's a cemetery and the school. So you have a huge section of a commercial street with a cemetery and a school all on one side, so that really actually impacts what kinds of businesses can be successful along there. And it's not a surprise that most of the businesses along here are not retail or service businesses, because you're really missing out on that sense of retail activity that happens when you have it on both sides. So that's one of the first things that jumped out at me. The second are building footprints. So these kinds of building footprints, the distance from the street, the parking on the side, all of those say mid-century arterial, that a lot of this stuff was built in the mid-century. So this doesn't look like a modern arterial. The other thing is, look at this right here. What are these? Houses. So the other thing that this says to me is that a lot of these lots aren't very deep. They're actually more like a traditional urban depth lot. They're not like these super gigantic Uber lots. And so again, that speaks to different kinds of things. But those are definitely things that I notice about Auburn Avenue, and I'm going to think about as I'm incorporating identities. So once I have a sense of maybe some different sectional identities and I'm thinking about how things are going, I want to zoom in a little bit and understand the contextual identity. And I want to know what's going on all around this street or the area that I'm studying. Is it urban or rural? Are there a lot of young people? Is there diversity? Are there manufacturing jobs? What defines it? Who are the people who live there? How do they define themselves? What kind of vertical markets are there? These are all things that I'm going to look at and think about when I'm talking about wanting to express things on the street. So let's look at some of the stuff that I found. The first thing I found is that you have a lot of fantastic local businesses on this street. A lot of them are invisible, but there is a fantastic collection of local businesses, and I want to stress that. So a lot of the corridors with all the national chains on them that you have all around the greater Sacramento region, those, from an outsider's perspective, all look like each other, and I can't tell when I'm on one or the other. Auburn Avenue is unique, and it is one of a kind, and we need to stress all of those things that make it unique and one of a kind and special. You have a lot of service and light industrial uses on this street. So that is, I would say, the two predominant vertical markets that exist on your street. You have an interesting and very unique collection of businesses that you are not going to find anywhere else. I loved that you have Abba Dabba, and I also love that they also sell party supplies, because that would never occur to me from looking at the building outside. So I think there's a lot of fun stuff that you could do with this business to even do more to show what they do. But what an amazing, unique, one-of-a-kind business. I really love that. You have a lot of expertise and knowledge on this street. So you have people who have been working on cars for how long have you guys been in the business?
20 years.
20 years.
Been in the trade 42 years.
42 years. That was a huge story yesterday. Jack, how long have you been managing bowling alleys?
50 years.
50 years. This guy knows more about bowling than anyone else in America. Okay, and he's on the street. That is a story that happened over and over and over again. The appliance repair shop has 120 years of appliance service experience working in that store. And they actually have machines that you can take apart, and they teach people how to take things apart and put them back together in the lobby of that store. It's a huge theme and this huge element of the street that's entirely invisible and people don't think about. You have a really strong sense of community identity in Citrus Heights. You have a client base that's very loyal to local businesses. You have a pride in that mix of the rural city feel, hence the horse photograph in the first section. And this used to be State Highway 40, which there's the marker. How many of you have seen this marker? Actually walked around and seen it. That's on Sylvan Corners, right? That's the name of it. So that's the original marker. Does anybody know where Highway 40 ended in the east? Atlantic City, New Jersey. So it was one of the original state highways from like 1926, and it went from San Francisco to Atlantic City, New Jersey. It still goes from New Jersey to about Utah, and then it dies out. So that's a pretty cool thing to think about tapping into as well. So once I have an idea of sectional identities and contextual identities, the last thing that I start thinking of is what are the identities of individual businesses or nodes, or maybe I'm working on a development site. That's when I really zoom down and start thinking about project by project, piece by piece, what are some of the things that I'm thinking of. So I really want to know all of these things. What story are the businesses telling? What story is the business telling? What can I tell about the experience, who they are, what they stand for, what it's going to be like to go in their store? And I'm going to be really honest that nobody on Auburn is telling their story, I think, maximally. So I want to give you an example of just thinking about that lightly, and I'm going to give you a whole bunch of examples toward the end. But again, I want to go back to this story. Why do I care about that? Because the consumer experience happens long before you walk in the door. We have to think about how do we create an Auburn Avenue district experience that people can feel a part of, and that's what makes them want to explore and go in the individual businesses that are on your street. So I want every business to be thinking about that. So I'm going to share a story from Gresham, and this is in honor of Jay, who's actually from Gresham, Oregon. So I threw in an example last night from Gresham. So I was doing a longer-term project there, and they had just started a storefront improvement program where the public sector would put some money into helping people fix up their buildings. And I gave a presentation, sort of an initial preliminary presentation, and the owner of this building, who's turned out to be amazing and has done some incredible work in Gresham, he came to me and said, well, we have this plan for this building, but I'm a little bit worried that maybe we're on the wrong track. So I want to take a little detour here before I get into that. So what do I hate about this building?
Awning's ugly.
That's one thing, but it's not the main thing.
Where's the door?
Yeah.
It is bland. It is beige city, right? Look at how hard you have to look to see that building and distinguish it from the road and the sidewalk. Is this building doing a very good job of letting me know that there's 4 businesses in there? Does it make me want to walk around? Does it get my attention whatsoever? No. So I want to talk about tan land, because Auburn Avenue has got a whole lot of tan going on, okay? And I heard that your city regulates color, and I would say that y'all aren't doing a real good job, because this is probably one of the worst collections of paid jobs, but totally normal that I've seen in a community. Stop being tan. I want you, beige is not a color, we need to get rid of it. and we need to think about how we can start telling a slightly different story. So I'm going to share just a little story with this building, but you're going to see a whole lot of color examples by the time we're done here today. Because color is the cheapest and easiest way to change the way people feel about a building. So we have this building. So this was his rework of the building. Now, with your guys' color schemes, you guys would think like, wow, that's a whole lot of color. I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. But I looked at this and said, we got a whole lot of tan still going on here. Like, you know, this was going to be the first storefront improvement project, and I wanted to knock it out of the park and have people talk about this project, not even notice it. So this is what he ended up with. And unfortunately, some of these after pictures, I was taking them right into the sun. I need to go back and take some others. But you can immediately tell 4 businesses here. Immediately your eye knows that. They're interesting, they're colorful. Did this get press coverage? Yes. Did everyone talk about it? Yes. Did newspapers go out and interview each individual business? Yes. Do people still talk about this paint job 3-4 years later? Yes. Do people still call him and ask, what colors did you use on this paint job? Does it draw your attention? Does it engage you? Does it make you think you might want to go there? Really good for business, good for the district, good for the conversation about what can you do with the building. But let's talk about what it did for him as a landlord. So he actually bought this building. He didn't design it. He would have never designed it this way. It's a little bit weird because it has these little office spaces in back. So this is a lot like a mid-century building because it's built up to the sidewalk, but all the parking is in back with a side entry. So it's a really common configuration and kind of mid-century arterial infrastructure. So it's a weird building because they have this office space with all of the systems and services in back. And here's the interesting thing, is painting them all out so that they were all grayed out and having the big green band with the colors on the side. Immediately, he could charge more in rent. He immediately got more rent for these spaces with the color scheme change. The second thing is that all the office tenants, up until the time he painted the building, they were never office tenants that had clients visit businesses. And after he painted the building, he started getting applications from people who had clients who visited their building. So these things have a huge impact, not just for businesses, but also for landlords and leasing spaces. So that is a very quick overview of the things that I think about when I'm trying to create some identity on a corridor. Where would I start? What are the things I want to pull out? And what do I focus on? So the next thing that I want to talk about is reinforcing nodes. So once I have a sense of all those identities, I want to think about how I'm improving and reinforcing nodes. It's really important to do that because, again, we have a long corridor. We're not going to fix it all overnight. So where do you put larger elements of public investment? Where do you focus some of your efforts? You want to do it in nodes. So what do I think about with a node? A node might be a single building with lots of small uses in it. So I can just make all of that into a place people want to visit and walk around. So I'm not necessarily worried about them walking around some other place. This was a natural one. It is not executing on any of the elements of retail, but it could be a fantastic node that would be really fun to walk around and visit all the businesses in it. It is not that now. The second kind of area I look for is where I might have a collection of really small buildings, pretty close to each other, pretty close to the sidewalk, with a bunch of small businesses. So a run like this, that's pretty compelling kind of run. I mean, I just look at that. None of them are executing, but I'm kind of like, what's going on over there? So I want that intensity of activity. Where do I naturally have it, where I can pull it out and bring it out and make it more engaging? And then the last thing that I look for is where I might have a collection of restaurants. And you have some little spots where you have some little local restaurants, but they're not executing on kind of a cool local restaurant feel, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. So I start thinking about identifying nodes, reinforcing nodes, and then the last thing I want to do is leverage adjacencies within the district and also within nodes. So does anybody know what adjacencies are in retail theory? Anyone? So adjacencies in retail theory are the study, basically, of what products you put by other products so that they all sell really well. And the national retailers have software that tracks all that and is constantly telling them how they should move merchandise around. I read a great marketing book once that this grocery store was really confused because their software was telling them to put phone cords by coconuts, and they couldn't figure out why the software was telling them that. But it turned out they had a lot of Caribbean immigrants in the community that were buying phone cards and coconuts. So that was an adjacency that made sense in that particular grocery store, but maybe not in others. So that is the theory of adjacency. So I want people to think about adjacencies in the district. And what is the thing that you need to know in order to create adjacencies if you're a business owner in a district? Yes?
How your business relates to a nearby business.
Mm-hmm. So do you need to know?
Compliance.
Right, but also do you need to know the other businesses on the street?
Yes.
How many of you guys really know each other and really know what each other offers and what your expertise is and what your specialties are and why you might send one of your clients to another person on the street? How many of you know that when somebody goes in for auto repair, they go grab a burger? Or what do you know about how people use your street and use the businesses on the street? You have to get together and share that information, okay? A successful district, no business is an island. Everyone is working together to figure out how to improve and leverage each other's businesses. So I think of two kinds of adjacencies in a district. I think of physical and emotional adjacencies, and I want to start with physical adjacencies. They're the easiest to understand. Basically, a physical adjacency is incorporating anything that is next to your business. And I don't care what's next to your business. Is it impacting your business if it's next to your business? It is. So you have to figure out how to make it contribute optimally. So here's an example. This is a medical facility that serves a lower income community. They're very into community health. And so they have a parking lot over here, and they created a community garden as an adjacency between the parking lot and the sidewalk and this recessed building. So that's a great way of creating a physical adjacency that really reflects their mission. Really fantastic. So I want to give you another example of a great physical adjacency, and you have some of these kinds of examples here between service uses and bars. This is a dentist, and his closest physical commercial neighbor is a bar. So most people would say, you know, how is a dentist going to create a physical adjacency out of a bar? So he sat down and he said, well, what does a bar need? They need coasters. So he made these really funny coasters, and he gives them for free to the bar, and they use them, and it's a great advertisement, and you get a sense that he has a sense of humor. The back of the coaster is a coupon for some teeth whitening, and it tells you a lot about this dentist, doesn't it? He now hands them out to bars all over the street, so it's more of an emotional adjacency, but that's a great example. He also is located right next to a bus stop. So he actually created his office so he can pipe music outside so the people in the bus stop have a nice experience. That's an example of creating all kinds of physical adjacencies with the things that are next to him. The second thing I want to talk about are emotional adjacencies. So emotional adjacencies are, actually I wanted to mention in our interviews yesterday, you have an optometrist who actually gives out, and what's the optometrist's name?
Texas Smith.
Texas Smith. So he hands out coupons for food and beverage at the restaurant immediately next door to him for whenever appointments are running late. Fantastic physical adjacency. So really great use of that sharing. Anyway, emotional adjacencies. These are basically anything you can interconnect in your district around vertical markets or just emotional things that people relate to. So I'm going to talk about some examples. I worked in a small downtown once, and it's really strange. They had sort of random, one of the largest ballroom dance floors west of Mississippi, a wedding planner, a high-end stationery store, a jeweler, and a caterer. And none of those people knew each other. And none of them were working together, and none of them were next to each other. But do they have a natural emotional adjacency around weddings? Absolutely. So what are the emotional adjacencies that exist in your district? Who are the people that can be working together? So here are some examples. This is a district that has a sculpture walk that is besprinkled all around in random places. Like some of them are kind of surprising. And they have an iPhone app that will take you on a guided tour of the different sculptures. So they're using art to create a physical adjacency. Lending libraries. So the free open lending libraries. Where is this one? Sullivan Corners, yeah, so it's really cute. So that's creating an emotional adjacency around books and reading. Anybody know what this is? Right? It's the beer bike. Woo, everyone's so happy on the beer bike. So this is connecting up brew pubs. None of them are next to each other, so the bike is creating this emotional adjacency between the happy activity of drinking micro beers. And what's funny is even when you're driving behind this thing and it's going really slow, you don't really mind because everyone's so happy and it's just cute and you kind of wish you were on the bike, right? So that's a very successful emotional adjacency. So I wanted to talk about probably one of your number one uses. I like to look at a vertical market that you have on the street that is big and think about how you might create some emotional adjacencies to it. So you have a lot of auto uses on the street, right? So how might we create an emotional adjacency to that? So number one, I want every person who does anything to do with cars to have an example out front. So this is actually from North Franklin Boulevard in South Sacramento, and they have over 300 auto businesses on that street, and there was only one that had a cool car out front. If every auto-focused business had a tricked-out rag in front of their business, the number one thing that would say about Auburn Avenue is if you want to get your car fixed, this is the place to go. And the really cool cars that you would see all the time when you drive through would reinforce that, so it would be good for business. If they changed over time, it almost becomes like an outdoor exhibit, and anybody who's into cars is going to be like, yeah, I'm going to check out all the cars, you know? They kind of swapped out, and they would see what kind of tricked out rides were in front of all of these businesses. You could work with the schools, and you could create an adjacency with all of the auto businesses and have internships and classes. They could be simple classes like how to change a tire, but also some sort of on-the-job training kind of internships, and really engage the community with this idea of this is a place where a lot of commerce related to cars happens. You can have an event around cars. So you could have a whole American Graffiti weekend where people cruise Auburn Avenue, and each parking lot has its own theme of cars, and the bars could serve retro drinks. And you could take all of those parking lots and have a band and a 60s dance. You could have a whole fun celebration around a gigantic business that you have in your district. So that is kind of a quick overview of the things that I like to think about when I am doing corridor analysis, and that is the end of our longest section. I'm going to just issue a caveat. One of the other things that I saw a lot on my walk on the first day were skateboarders. I have a lot of pictures of skateboarders of all ages and genders skateboarding on and around Auburn Avenue. That might be something to create an emotional adjacency to. You have a lot of parking lots. Could somebody install a temporary ramp? Or there was a place that did a really neat outdoor light installation that created a BMX and skateboard track that moved, and you had to, kind of go along with it. And it created an evening activity. So I might think about how to tap into all the skateboarding that's happening in your district. So next up, what I want to talk about are things that really have to do with site identity. So have to do with what are the things that individual business and property owners can be doing to really start to tell a better story on the street. So these are the two things I want to talk about here. I'm going to start with existing buildings. If your existing buildings look tired and depressed and invisible, how do we feel as consumers when we are in that district? Tired and depressed. Okay, do we like to spend money on anything but chocolate when we're tired and depressed? No. Okay, so we really have to work hard. The other thing is when we look at a building that's dated and worn, what do we think about the business on the inside? We think it's dated and worn. Okay, so we got to tackle that. So existing buildings, it's a really easy formula, and I'm just going to walk through it here, and I've done a million of these. Color, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is just color. So this is the kind of building, this is a mid-century, completely boring building. A lawyer was in this for a long time, but his practice was shrinking, and he was just going to be leasing it out. And guess what? Not a lot of people were super interested in leasing office space here, but he didn't have a lot of budget to fix it up. All he had was paint. Here is the after. Just paint. Not a thing changed on this building. And I want you to note the use of 3 colors. I want at least 3 colors on every single building in Auburn Avenue over time, because that's how you highlight interesting building details. So just having that little bit of kind of charcoal red go around these windows made them a really neat and engaging feature, even though they're just vinyl windows and there's nothing really all that interesting about them. Here's a before of a concrete block warehouse, not horribly exciting, and here's the after. It's the exact same building. All they did was carve in some windows, and then everything got multiple colors of blue. There's a couple colors of blue in here, and then they differentiated these long, big buildings by using color to break them up, so they're interesting and engaging to the eye, and they tell you right off the bat that there's a mix of small businesses here. And here's how it looks at night. So we were just talking about this. You have an obligation as a daytime business to make sure your business looks great at night when you're closed, so that you're creating an environment that's good for the evening businesses. When you're an evening business, you have an obligation to make sure that when your daytime business is closed, it creates a great environment for the people who are open during the day. I know that homelessness is a big problem on your street. One of the reasons why is your entire street looks closed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I cannot tell which businesses are open, which ones are out of business, which ones are closed. You're not telling a great story. So it's sending the message like, please come conduct illicit activities here. It is constantly sort of broadcasting that story. Here's a before. This looks kind of familiar, just a normal auto body shop. This turned into micro restaurant spaces. I want you to notice, instead of using this for parking, he turned it into a seating area. And this is off of busy arterial, and before and after. So color is cheapest and easiest way to tell a new story about a district and a business. The second thing I want you to think about when you're using color is highlighting any kind of building detail. And every building has something. They have an archway, or they might just have an interesting texture, or they might have some horizontal lines that go here and some vertical over here, or just some windows, something. There's always a way to highlight building detail. So you look at this building, and you would have no idea that all that building detail was there. And the paint is what helps to bring it out. Here's a before, so everything is painted gray, and they just painted all the brick and all the different trim detail, and it looks much better because we're really highlighting the things that are special and interesting about the building. The next thing is transparency. We, in a commercial district, want to see and be seen. We want to see in stores, we want natural light in stores, when we're in a store, we want to see outside the store. We want transparency, and the more natural light, the better. So can anybody guess, this is next to a freeway, has a gigantic parking lot in front. There is nothing charming about this location. Can anybody guess what this became? It became a Trader Joe's. This is the exact same building, okay? So what they did was, so this is actually concrete, which is a little bit strange. So the footers on this thing are like a bomb shelter, and they had to saw cut through this to create that window line. This looks like a lot of the infrastructure that I have on Auburn, okay? This does not. It's the same building. So the trick on the interior is you expose the roof deck, and almost all your mid-century buildings are gonna have really beautiful, this is the original roof deck. It creates a warm feeling in the space. You put the insulation on top of that, and then you roof on top of that. That's how you do it. It makes the space fantastic. And I can now see in. So do you think Trader Joe's is gonna do more business in this building or in this building? You know why? Because I'm in a great freaking mood before I walk in the dang door. Okay, the retail experience happens long before you walk in the door. So important. Operable windows, when you get into that with restaurants, are very sexy. Anytime I'm blurring the edge between inside and outside, we're creating compelling and interesting spaces that draw the eye and are interesting and engaging. So let's look at some of the window situations on Auburn Avenue. We have a lot of blocked windows. We have a lot of windows where I have no idea what's going on in there. I don't know if it's open. I don't know what sort of business is in there. I have buildings that I feel like should have windows, but they don't. This is a nicely painted building. So sheet metal HVAC contractor, they do their own sheet metal fabrication. So it'd be really cool if they used that and did some cool art installations with sheet metal fabrication, or created some really decorative gutters, because they do gutters too. Every business can tell a story about what they do on the outside. So lots of blocked windows, covered windows. I did retail leasing for a long time. And I'm gonna tell you right now, if I'm standing outside a space for lease and the only thing I can see is the reflection and my picture taking a photo, it's gonna be really hard to lease that space. I couldn't really even see in it when I had my face pressed to the glass. So there's very little transparency on Auburn. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is building lighting. So street lighting is for cars. Building lighting is for people. So we look at building lighting and store lighting and window lighting and tree lighting and product lighting and outdoor light installations and mural lighting. All of those things are the things that say a district is open at night, a district is safe at night, we want you to come and hang out, and we want you to come be a part of this. Street lighting is really just for cars, and it doesn't tell any of those other messages. So that's the story. Those are the things you need to think about to make your buildings tell a new story and to improve business. And I want to just share with you an example, kind of walking through that. This is from a town also in Oregon called Hillsboro. And this was a shoe store. This was another town I started working in just as they were launching a storefront improvement program. And John Gimmery came to my first presentation, and then he sent me a note and said, I'm a little worried that I'm on the wrong track with my storefront renovation. So before I launch into that, I want to ask you, I'm driving by this store. You got about 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds to really tell somebody something about what you do. What is the first thing your eye notices? The awning. Does he sell awnings? Okay, so is he executing on the basics of retail? I'm going to ask these nice vocal women over here. He sells pretty high-end shoes. Is he telling you that story from the street? Are you going to go in that store and look for a pair of high-end shoes? Absolutely not. Right? Because the retail experience happens long before you walk in the door, and I don't care what you're selling. So, awnings are probably one of the most misunderstood temporary finishes on buildings. They create a big shadow over the space. They're blocking the way that the window looks. Unless you're creating a fantastic outdoor room underneath that awning, it's probably detracting from your business. So, so I'm going to show you. So this was before. So this was the plan. Same color, we're just gonna replace the awning. So we have all the same problems, only now he looks like a Greek restaurant on top of everything else. So what's the first thing I wanted to do? Yes, I wanted to get rid of the awning. So we're gonna get rid of the awning, and then the second thing I wanted to do was look at color. So he'd already repainted the building boring off-white. And he said, Reeves, I'm not repainting the building, but I'll look at trim. I'll do some trims. I said, okay, we can work with that. And before I get into it, I just want to give John Gimmery credit, because as you're kind of noticing, when I work in a community for 6 months, like subjecting yourself to me showing slides to the community is really, really brave. So John was super brave to kind of embark on this journey in a more public setting. Most people live in fear of making my slideshow in longer-term projects. So this was the first stage. We just took the awning off and we introduced a warmer color scheme. So we've got the off-white, we've got the coral, and one of the tricks too to differentiate from the sidewalk is to create a third color on the bottom. So that's a good trick if you want to differentiate a space within other spaces. So it looks a lot better already, doesn't it? Doesn't the building look relieved to no longer be holding up the awning? I mean, it's just like, thank God, thank you for taking the awning off. So I don't particularly like off-white, but what is this area good for? Yeah. So the reason I have show, don't tell up here is I don't want you to tell me anything. I want you to show me. So just like creative writing, you don't say Bob was sad. You say Bob was sobbing into his cornflakes. You show how people feel. As a business, you have to show who you are, what you're about, what kind of experience you offer on the outside. Then you worry about a sign. So we're going to put a sign up here, but I wanted to show something with the sign. And I wanted to show that this shoe store had been here for generations. So we took a 50s era logo and turned it into the sign because it has this whole retro feel, and we really wanted to show the sense of history around this shoe store. So what's the last thing missing in our formula? Building lighting. So here is his store closed, and here is his store open. Okay? So which one did people cross the street from the theater and come check him out when he was closed and come back and say, I saw your store last night? This one. Which one did people come up and say, I never knew you were here, even though his store had been here for generations and it's a pretty small town? How do you think his business did? Yeah, better. We didn't do this all overnight. We actually did it over the course of a year. So everything that I'm talking about here, you don't have to do it overnight. He just worked out a cash flow. Every 3-4 months, they'd call up and say, okay, we're ready to pick out some lighting. What do you think of this? And so you can just do it a piece at a time, over time, and in each phase, everyone got really excited and interested, and definitely was helpful for business. So you want to think about how you show those things. So those are things to think about with your existing buildings. Mm-hmm.
Another thing I noticed about it was that you took down all the signs in front on his windows because that's detracting.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about that a little bit with sidewalk dialogue. So the last thing that I want to talk about is street dialogue. I want to know what conversations every business is having at the street level. And I care about that because the entire identity of the district is happening at the street level. And so I want to know what every business is doing to tell their story. Is this inside or outside? It's kind of hard to tell though, isn't it? She's just created a little room there on a sidewalk next to a warehouse. She's actually a wholesaler. She doesn't sell retail, but she's creating a really great experience before you walk into her store. And you appreciate that, and you're in a good mood, and you want to spend money as a result. So let's talk about sidewalk dialogue a little bit more with recessed buildings, which we have a lot of on our arterials. So do we have to think about sidewalk dialogue when we're in a recessed building? Absolutely. Only now we have two sidewalks to think about. So we have this store sidewalk, and this is a very narrow, tiny sidewalk in this strip mall. But what do they sell? Yeah, women's clothes. You know that immediately. This business has been here for 40 years. You think their ability to merchandise and tell their story on the sidewalk is a piece of that? Absolutely. And every time I go to the strip mall for anything else, I always, kind of thumb through, and sometimes they lure me in. So great example. So with a recessed building, you have two sidewalks. You have your sidewalk in front of your store, and then you have your sidewalk that's on the street. So you have to think about that. So let's look at this mall renovation. I hate the color, but they did a lot of other things right. So, so this is a strip mall renovation, and the sidewalk, the sidewalk that's on the street, they incorporated the bus stop into the identity of the project, so it became a positive, not a negative. They have these really beautiful rusted metal screens, and you notice from the height I'm taking this picture, they block out some of the parking lot, but I can still see all of the strip mall. So what's interesting is I've probably driven by this on an arterial a zillion times, and I never noticed the rusted wall. And the first time that I walked by it, the contrast with these plants, like it was just beautiful. And the complexity of the color and the rusted wall, I just really liked it. And it was for me. They put it up there for me, for the pedestrian, not for a driver, because you don't notice it as a driver. So the whole, development looks pretty good from the street sidewalk, and they've made a real effort to create a pedestrian journey from the street sidewalk to the store sidewalks. So that's telling an important message as well, and that's entirely missing on Auburn Avenue. And then at the store sidewalk level, this actually got Restaurant of the Year in the city of Portland on an arterial in a strip mall. And they have a fantastic little seating area here right on the parking lot, taking up a couple of spots and using it for seating instead of for parking. So those are things that I want people to think about when you're thinking about how you tell a better story. So I'm going to think about sidewalk dialogue for lots of different kinds of businesses. So can anybody tell me what this business is? The national chain.
We sell a beverage, Starbucks.
So this is Starbucks in a strip mall. This is a strip mall. It's on an arterial. So very popular neighborhood Starbucks. So I used to stop here when my daughter had tutoring for some Spanish. And so this was like a happy hour by myself for all you parents out there. We're just like, woo. But this day I didn't spend it in Starbucks. I used to spend it out on this bench that's out here. They probably spent a fortune on this really expensive refacing of this strip mall. And it was really interesting to watch people interact with this Starbucks. So they walked right here, and they did this. They didn't move. They looked left, and they looked at that door. Not very inviting. They didn't move. Then they would pan right, and they'd look down, and they'd check out that door, and they're like, I'm not walking down there. Still without moving, they'd go like this. They'd look up, sort of looking for a sign. Am I in the right spot? So then there's this curved piece of wood that they probably spent $1 zillion on putting in. And that was the warmest, most inviting thing. So people would follow that right into a window. So they had to put this plant here to stop people from walking into the window. So what is the thing that's missing?
Signage.
No.
Wayfinding.
Signage is telling. It's not showing. What is the best sign for a restaurant? Tables and chairs. The $200 that you spend on those tables and chairs immediately tell me they sell prepared food and they're open. You cannot do that with a sign. Almost none of your restaurants have any attractive seating areas outside. There's a lot of restaurants on Auburn Avenue. I can't tell. I'm not going to go in any of them. None of them are doing a good job of trying to get my attention. This is an example of a pizza place that has an outdoor seating area. They took 2 spots out of the parking lot and put an outdoor seating area immediately adjacent to the pizza place. I don't care if people are sitting in them or not. It looks nice. It tells me something about the pizza place, something about the experience that they're going to give me, that they sell prepared food, and they're trying to, kind of lure me in. Those are really important messages. So I'm going to give you a before and after of a recessed building with a great seating area. So we have the horrible awning, the dark windows, it's kind of recessed. They put in some bike parking, which is a little bit nice. Here's the after. Which brew pub do you want to go in? Which one's showing like, hey, come on in, you're welcome. So one of the great things about having a recessed building in a giant parking lot is you can take some room to do this and somebody isn't right on the busy street. And you can actually sit outside and have a conversation and have it be this pleasant, wonderful, fantastic place to be. That's what local restaurants can do. That's what they can deliver on. So I want people to think about this. What is this use? Anybody guess?
It's feed store. Feed stores in farm towns on a state highway. It's the coolest thing in their downtown. On a state highway. I was the only pedestrian that day. Auto uses can tell a great story from the street. This is an auto body shop. Okay? So I want to talk about what he's showing us. How do we feel when we need to go to an auto body shop? Yes, we are not happy, and we're worried, and we're angry, and lots of negative emotions. So what is he showing you about, it's going to be okay, I'm going to take care of you, I've got this, okay? What is he showing you about craftsmanship, attention to detail, design, that he's going to be able to restore your car? Is he showing you all those things pretty successfully? Can you put that on a sign? No, really, I care and I'm going to take care of you and I have really good craftsmanship. And no, you cannot tell people that. You can show people that. Now I want to show you his sign. Now is that the ultimate example of show, don't tell? I saw that sign and I laughed out loud and I loved him and I had never met him. Okay, because he's got a great sense of humor, and I'm like, okay, you know, this guy, he's gonna get it. So every business can tell a great story from the sidewalk, and they can show who they are, and what they're about, and what kind of experience they're gonna provide. Service uses. Can anybody guess what this is? Winery, drugstore, nope. It's a medical office building. Medical office buildings are usually not on my happy list of street dialogue, but these guys are. So medical office buildings don't need windows and exam rooms. So if they take a building and they put exam rooms on street front windows, they're always blocked off. So what they did with this one is they built the exam rooms back from the windows because they don't need them there. They created a recessed seating area. So you kind of see people during the day, but they're a little bit low, so you're not staring right at them in the face. And then at the ends of each of the banks of exam rooms, they have giant murals depicting the history of the neighborhood. So it becomes a giant outdoor art exhibit at night when it's closed, and it's fantastic. Okay, any business can tell a great story from the sidewalk. Can you tell me what this business is? Mexican restaurant. That's a good guess. No. What? Offices? We're getting close to the dentist's office. So this is not just a dentist's office. This is a dentist's office in a border town of Mexico that does medical tourism and attracts Americans down for affordable, high-quality dental care. So what do they need to show those tourists? It's going to be fine. I'm economically successful enough to have a nice building. I'm going to do a good job on your teeth. Every single service professional, insurance, lawyers, doctors, I want to know that they're successful enough at what they do that when I need their services, they're going to be able to do a good job for me. They do not pay enough attention to how their buildings look, and often their buildings on the outside look like they're entirely unsuccessful. So I want service users to think about how to tell a great story from the street. Undesirable uses can be fantastic from the street, things that people often will say, we don't want that, or they'll try and get rid of it in their towns. This is in the town of Fallon, Nevada, and I was being driven around in this gigantic truck, and I nearly fell out of the window of the truck. They know they took me on the tour. I do this like crazy Google car thing where I'm just constantly taking pictures from the car. And so yeah, I nearly fell out of the truck because I was like, oh my God, what's that? So what is this? Can you tell me?
Motorcycle shop.
Motorcycle shop? No. Restaurant? No, it's a pawn shop.
Huh.
Right? Pawn shops forget that they're not just money lenders, they're retailers too. This guy hasn't forgotten that. He's created a great retail storefront, and I would feel totally comfortable going in there if I wanted to pawn something, whereas I might not ever go into another pawn shop because they're not making me feel comfortable from the outside. And then aging malls, this is another group, definitely. I feel like across America there's a rule that all aging strip malls have to be beige, because they are all beige. I don't know what that is. Now, they're not doing a great job from the street because the color's bad. They haven't given me a great walkway in on the street sidewalk, so I'm not happy with that. But I want you to look at what they've done with the store sidewalk. So everywhere I walk in this strip mall, there is something going on the sidewalk, and it's super engaging, and it's really fun, and I remember every single business that's in this. I don't remember their names, but I remember every business that's in this mall, what they do. And what was interesting is that I was doing a mapping project, but in walking around there, like that's one of the things I notice is, do I want to stop while I'm working and doing my mapping project? And I wanted to shop in each one of these little stores. They created a great little node of activity in this one strip mall once I was there on the store sidewalk. So here's another strip mall. This is in Gresham again. So in honor of Gresham, here's another aging strip mall. They're not doing a great job of bringing me in from the sidewalk. They're not doing a great job of giving me identity. I want to note a little thing here. This is really common with strip mall infrastructure, and it's really common on Auburn. The only place you're introducing color is the roof. Okay, so pretty much the only place I see color in your district is on the roof, and that's weird, and I don't know why you would want to attract everyone's attention to your roof, because it has nothing to do with your business. So, really common with strip malls. So this has one big anchor business, which is Craft Warehouse. And are they doing a good job at the store sidewalk? Absolutely. Did it stop? Did it get my attention? Did I take a million photos? Did I want to go in and shop? And did I touch each one of these cars? Yes. Okay, so it was doing its job. Here is how the rest of this strip mall looked. Okay, does that look pretty familiar? Here's the thing, to this day, I couldn't tell you another business in the strip mall. And I spent more time in it than I did in the other one, but there's just like nothing to engage you. There was nothing interesting. There's nothing that made me want to walk around. I was like, oh, great, I gotta go walk around the rest of this. So it has a huge impact on commerce. So does that look familiar? Yeah. And then the last thing, of course, is retailers. So for retailers, the three things I want to know. Number one, can I even see your storefront window? This is a bicycle store. I can't see their storefront windows behind all this landscaping because the city has a giant landscaping requirement in this smaller town downtown. So that's a problem. The second question I have is, can I see in your windows? And the answer to that on Auburn Avenue is just no. Okay, because I don't think there was a single window I could see in. So let me ask you a question. What does she sell? So there was an article in the Vancouver, Washington paper about how angry she was that nobody from the offices were coming in and getting smoothies at lunch. So is there anything she's telling you about the fact that she has prepared food? She did go out of business. And then the third question I have is, how do your windows look at night? So back to the question that you had about the windows. If you notice, there's like a whole bunch of crap on this window, and I can't see through it. We don't like to go in places that we can't see in and understand from the outside. And so this is not inviting. This is closed. I went back to this store, this is Tacoma, Washington, because of the experience it gave me at night when it was closed. I was like, I gotta go check this place out. It's pretty cool. So you want to think about what conversations are your street front windows having when you're open and when you're closed. I want all retailers to be thinking about that. So I'm going to give you an example. This is from another small farm town of just this basic retail execution and the impact of it. Can anybody tell me what this guy sells? His primary, what?
Vintage.
Vintage, that's a good guess, but it's not his primary business here. Furniture thrift stores?
Fantasy.
Furniture thrift store, all of these are great guesses. Ice cream and sandwiches. But he does sell vintage and thrift online. And then he stores a lot of it here. So he doesn't really sell very much of that out of the store. So what's funny is in this corner space, there were some tables in there, and so you could sit at them, but when you were eating, you felt like you were maybe interrupting shopping, or if you were shopping, you felt like you were interrupting eating, and it was very uncomfortable. And since he didn't really sell very much of the vintage stuff through his store, does it make sense to have it on the corner? Right. So what is ice cream and sandwiches? What is our money product? Great. Ice cream, because everyone loves ice cream. We love to see people eating ice cream. We love to eat ice cream. We love the way cones smell. Ice cream is something that we all have a strong emotional connection to. So we want to put the ice cream in the corner, and we want to take all the vintage stuff and move it into his garage and just use the cool things to rotate through and decorate the space. And we wanted to clean up the outside and make it really clear that we wanted people to actually come in the corner and that it was open. We wanted to see through the windows to the other side, right? We want this transparency between the inside and the outside. And then here is how he looks at night. Okay? Really basic. What changed here? He painted a little bit, he got rid of crap in his windows, and he lit it better. He painted the inside a great color. Okay, really basic retail execution that anybody can do on Auburn Avenue right now. So, some thoughts on street dialogue. I love the bowling alley. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And not just because Jack's there. Okay, so one of the things I would think about, we were talking about the bowling business, and a lot of the bowling business is getting into like kids and parties. It's gonna be a little bit hard for this facility to compete with that, but what might be fun is to go in a slightly kind of celebrate the retro and go in a hipster evening direction. And if you could take out a piece of the side here and have like a bar and an outdoor area that comes out, and you do like outdoor bocce as well, which is sort of like outdoor bowling, and you mirror the idea of what's going on the inside and create this indoor-outdoor experience of stuff happening here, and focus on evening uses and adults that are going to appreciate kind of the fun retro feel of the bowling alley. And it's so recessed. We want to think about how to bring some of that activity and some of those people up, and you have a full bar and make a lot of money that way. So the lawnmower place, I loved it. It would be so fun to have a strip of like AstroTurf with people test driving, riding mowers. I thought it would be so fun to like have them, even if you just painted the sidewalk green and had people like driving on it out there, it would get your attention every time you drive by. Like, there's a guy driving a mower out there, that's awesome. This business is really cool. So the Harris Gas, I don't know if you guys realize this, but their Auburn location is the oldest blacksmithing forge in the state of California. And this business is the oldest business on the street. It was 78 years they've been here. So when they got here, it was just a bunch of fields. Okay, we don't want to lose these businesses. We want to celebrate these businesses. So they actually have an event once a year where they bring interesting things that they forge out, and they said they get a lot of people who stop in and are just like, what the heck is going on here? What are you guys? What do you do? Right? So what I would like them to think about doing, just like the sheet metal fabricator, is how can we create an outdoor, so first of all, they do specialty gases. If they do anything with helium, it'd be cool to have some sort of helium thing outside that changed. But also some of the stuff that they forge, you can buy raw steel here, which you can't buy in very many places. They work with it in the Auburn store. So there's this whole story they can tell about the industrial stuff that they do out of this facility that should be evidenced from the street more often. Mm-hmm.
As you're going through the businesses and making comments, can you also talk about colors that you think play very well with this part of the country and this district, so we can start thinking about colorways?
Anything. Any color other than beige. Yeah. There's no magic palette. Like, you want to think about your individual businesses. If I've got a tattoo parlor, I'm going to want a different color scheme than if I'm doing a women's day spa. So I really want to work backward from how do I want them to feel when they're walking into this place? What do they need to know about me? What do they need to know about this experience? Is it a man's store? Is it a cigarette store? Is it a place a lady's going to go and spend a half a day on expensive spa services? All of those things really inform the color palette. So I really try and work backward from the way I want people to feel when they walk in my store.
Okay. Harris, because it's got such an old history, are you going retro?
You might want to, and it does have kind of a house feel on the front, and then there's the industrial stuff on the back. So I'd have to dive into it a little more. I mean, within the window I was here. But yeah, and I really want to bring some of that heavy manufacturing feel to the street and think about how to show the stuff that they do and contribute to, because it's really cool. And then street seating. You have a little bit of street seating, and it all looks like it belongs in a prison yard. Right? This is not super inviting. And so there weren't very many places that people were sitting in it, and it could tell a much better story with just a little bit more work. So I love these little burger places, and we really want to make this a spot where people want to congregate and sit out and have a burger and really celebrate that. So that is the end of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to just sort of conclude with a final story of a really interesting arterial district building remodel and economic development project. So this is in Portland on an arterial called Foster, and it's a project called the Portland Mercado. And it was completed by Hacienda CDC, which does affordable housing for the Latino community. And they wanted to create an economic ecosystem to help the Latino community open food businesses and incubate food businesses and grow them up into bigger businesses that became larger restaurants or larger wholesale manufacturing. So this is the building that we started with. Pretty unattractive, isn't it? So we have this tiny little building you see here and this giant overgrown lot with really rough asphalt. So here's a before of the building and a before of the building. So most people would say, tear it down. There's nothing you can do with this. So Hacienda sat down, they worked really hard with their community, they formed an Assembly Advisory Committee, they developed institutional partnerships, they applied for a lot of grant funds over the years, and put together a real guerrilla development plan to create something really active here. So this is the whole site. We only had a 7,000 square foot building on a much larger lot. So we decided, because we didn't have very much space in here, to create a food cart pod. So in Portland, we do food carts instead of food trucks. They're still mobile, but you just gotta hitch them in their trailer. You gotta hitch them to the back of a truck. But you can create a little bit more of a better looking, permanent, semi-permanent food installation with food carts than you can with food trucks. They're more approachable and engaging because they're a little bit closer to the street. So we wanted something that, this very busy arterial, we wanted to bring it up and have closer activity, people eating. We want to showcase people, and lots of color. So this is the building, and we put bathroom and services back here, some food stalls here. This is a former vault. This building was originally a mid-century bank, then it became a used car dealership. So we turned the vault into a space, we turned this into a little bar space, these are little retail spaces, and then this is a commercial kitchen where we do classes and different kinds of food education, and then people in the facility can use it. So let's look at some of the befores and afters. So here's a before, and here's an after from the same spot. So these are the food carts, don't they look great? Fantastic, don't they? Covered seating area. If you notice, it's really cold out today, the day that this was taken, and it's still March, so it just opened, and they were massively more busy than they thought they were going to be, so lots of panicked phone calls about what do we do with all the trash. And so from this view, here's the after. It is the exact same building. It's the same crappy T111 siding. We did carve in some more windows. This is the little bar space. This is a social enterprise bar. So the profits of the bar, some of them, go back into the project to help to subsidize the rent. So really neat facility. This is meant to be a bridge between cultures. It's in an environment which is largely not Latino, so they were going to have to cross over and appeal, but we still wanted it to draw from a large Latino population. And what we're seeing so far is it's bringing in a lot of people who are native Spanish speakers, and it's bringing in a lot of local residents, and so it's creating this place that people feel comfortable crossing cultural boundaries. Here are some interior shots. So again, the formula, we had a horrible false ceiling. Carpet on the floors, we ripped it out, we exposed the concrete, we ripped out the ceiling and exposed the roof truss. It's not that nice a roof truss, but it didn't matter. So here's the after. And here's one of the little grocery spaces. It has a little low ceiling, but it looks much better with the trusses exposed than it did with the false ceiling on it. Here's the little vault. It's a candy store. Here's the bakery. Here's the little bar. And here is the commercial kitchen. So what I really wanted to say to you guys, and the reason I showed this example, is I think that you guys here have the building infrastructure, the collection of amazing businesses and the community spirit to turn Auburn Avenue into an amazing hub of local business and local business expertise that is wonderful and unique and reflects your fantastic community. So that's what I am covering today.
I think it's terrific. I think you should have sat all the city planners down and browbeat them in a room, because we're all victims of the planning process here in anybody's city. I don't mean to just beat up Citrus Heights. And that's why you see beige building. You can have any color you like as long as it's beige, or have it blend in with everything else on the street. Or we don't want that type of planting, even though we have it all over the city center.
Right.
So it's, this is what has to be tackled.
So what we're going to have actually after this, we're going to sit down with city staff and we're going to kind of talk about some of your current planning and zoning and how to look at the city toolkit in a way to foster kind of revitalization and existing business success. So we're going to be talking about some of that actually directly after this meeting. One of the things I say about color in particular is nobody wants to be the color police. It's a horrible job, right? It's a no-win ever. Nobody is ever happy with whoever is set up to be the color police. So one of the first things that I do in communities that have a lot of color restrictions is recommend getting rid of those because it just breaks relationships. It does mean that maybe you don't have an ugly purple building, but it also means that you don't have a single fantastically painted building, and that's the cost. And so I'd rather you have an ugly purple building and a lot of fantastically painted buildings than to have everything be beige. And so, those are some of the things that we're going to kind of look at and talk about that toolkit. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes?
You didn't talk a lot about signage. It just wasn't a theme there. Talk more about color. How do you feel about signage?
I'll talk a little bit more about signs. So people don't use signs the way that you think. So actually, we were just talking about signs yesterday, and it would be great if you would tell your story of the woman who's trying to find her space. Just tell her real quick.
Yeah, so I had a customer call and wanted to have an estimate done on a vehicle, and I gave him the address, told him where it was in between the two streets. 10 minutes later, the phone rings. I can't find your place. I said, okay, where are you? I'm off Antelope. I said, we'll come down Auburn Boulevard. He pointed out everything to her. 10 minutes later, the phone rings again. She is mad at me because she feels I gave her the wrong directions. And I said, okay, well, where are you? I'll come get you. She goes, okay, so tell me where you are. Give me some description. She was in my parking lot next to my sign. And I walked out with my phone and said, hi. That's a true story.
Right.
Wow.
So here's the thing
And I
about
have a big sign.
yeah, right. So here's the how people use signs. So when you drive down the street, how many signs do you read? 0. So what we do is we just tune all that out. We just filter it out because we can't possibly process and read all those signs and drive safely. So we don't look at them. We don't make decisions about, oh, hey, check that out. There's a sign there that says restaurant. We don't do that. So we notice color and we notice people and we notice movement. That's one of the reasons everyone puts those horrible things out that move. But really that's just telling a story that it's something kind of cheap and crappy. So I don't want you to use movement that way. That's why I want transparency. I want people to see commerce and exchange and people and color because they notice all of those things before they notice a sign. So the way that I think about signs is you want to think, first I want you to pretend language doesn't exist and that signs are illegal. Then I want you to think about what are all the ways that you can show who you are and what you do and what you're about on the outside. And then once you do all of that, figure out the sign that fits into that. But the sign's actually the last piece, and here's how we use signs. When I know I'm going to your store, I ignore all signs until I'm getting close. And then I start, is that it? Is that it? Is that it? I still don't even read them. I'm just noticing whether they're your sign or not. And then I'm like, oh, there it is. That's the only time I use signs. So you have to think about all of those other things before you kind of tackle the sign. And that's why I don't talk about them a lot. They're not going to bring people into your store. They're really there to help direct people who've already decided they're going to go to your store.
What about the look of the city itself when we have so many signs? Doesn't it just kind of take away from the business themselves?
What's funny is I get this issue with every kind of sign. So if I go into a dead downtown, so the number one thing everyone asks me about, is parking. And then the second thing they ask me about is A-frame signs, because all there is on the sidewalk is a bunch of A-frame signs. Well, the reason it looks horrible is because there is nothing else on the sidewalk. So I can show you a picture of a super successful retail district that has 20 times more A-frame signs, but you don't even care because there's so much going on the sidewalk that you don't really notice them. So part of the reason why all you notice is this huge junky collection of signs is there is nothing else to look at on Auburn. And so part of, that will have less of an impact if there's a lot of other stuff going on that's engaging and pleasing to the eye. And then over time, as people get better at figuring out how to tell those stories, they'll recognize how to have signs that are gonna, kind of contribute to what they do. But I don't worry about that so much, is how do we
That
create
makes
more
sense.
to,
That actually makes sense.
yeah.
All these for sale and for lease signs, they're getting smaller. The one in front of Dave's blocks his sign. And when you're at Auburn Boulevard and they're all for sale and for lease, all these huge signs, it shows failure all the way down. They're getting smaller on the building back because, like I said today, this morning, Dave's sign's blocked by a huge for sale or lease sign.
Right.
And it shows failures around Auburn Boulevard, which brings crime because it shows we're all vacant. Come and do drugs in the back of our building. There's nobody here to watch you 24 hours a day. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I do. So I think one of the things that we talked about yesterday a little bit is you want to think about a little bit of carrot versus stick. So I completely agree, and it was a piece of, there's so much I always want to throw in, so I had to cut some of those pictures for time. But you do have not only do you have a lot of for lease and for sale signs, but a lot of them look like they've been up for about 20 years because they're like falling over and you have graffiti on them. So what that says to me is there's some things that we need to think about from the city perspective, like, are there things in the city toolkit that are making it hard to lease spaces? So the first thing that I'm going to look at, rather than like beat people over the head about signs, is why do we have the vacancies? Why do we have long-term vacancies? What can we do to get rid of the long-term vacancies? And there's really two things. One is looking again at the city toolkit and are there things that are preventing those spaces from being leased out? And the second thing is, do we need to get some technical assistance in the hands of property owners who are selling and leasing spaces to help them do that more effectively? Because the vast majority of the spaces that are for lease in your district are, they're not very appealing. So it's funny. So when I work with property owners, one of the first things I say is, what did you do to your house before you put it on the market? So before you put your house on the market, you do all the work to your house that you never did for yourself. Right? And then you're like, why didn't I do this 10 years ago? Why do you do that? You do that because nobody has vision about the potential of your house. For some reason, people think that that doesn't apply in the commercial market, and I have no idea why they think that way. And you know what? If you're in a totally rocky, mature, high-income district that is really doing well, you can have a kind of crappy-looking space and somebody might pay to fix it up because that district is generating so much in sales per square foot. That is not the case on Auburn Avenue, okay? So in order to tenant things on Auburn Avenue, I need property owners who are doing some of the basics of making space appealing. It needs to be divided. It needs to be the right size for the kinds of tenants that are likely to come in, and really understand the piece of how you market and move those spaces. And they're not doing that. So there's kind of two pieces of how, I would prefer to tackle it that way than probably a sign ordinance, but it's definitely sending a horrible message. And it's, a sign that there are these deeper problems. So rather than, tackle it from a sign perspective, I'd want to try and tackle it from how do we get rid of the vacancies.
I've noticed that a lot of the parking lots are really poor asphalt, really torn up and old. Would that be one thing that would help the look of our street first, or paint on the building?
Yeah, I would do that second. A parking lot's a parking lot, and it's not engaging, and nobody ever says, you do say, like, I like to go to that Costco versus that Costco because it's easier to park. But we're not in a, but you never say, I like to go to that Costco because their parking lot is beautiful. You say, I like to go to that Costco because it's easier to park. So there's nobody who's really making a decision about where to go on Auburn because one parking lot is slightly more beautiful than the other. They're definitely having an impact, but right now you're so not executing on the basics of showing. You have, the music lesson people and the t-shirt people and some really cool thrift stores. And actually, I really like the florist, and with a little bit of work on that building, we could make it look fantastic. And so just, those kinds of things, like I would focus on those first because they make really strong connections to people and people notice it. So everyone who drives through, every time you do one of these little buildings, and we talked about yesterday, you guys have a lot of do-it-yourself know-how on this street. You have a lot of paint stores. Actually, I meant to put it in the slide. Paint stores are my number one. You have a lot of paint stores that are painted horribly. Okay? A paint store is the ultimate opportunity to show just beige and looks horrible. And in fact, paint stores should change their painting scheme once a year, because they should constantly be showing people what you can do with their product. And not just that, I want an outdoor demonstration wall where there are classes for different kinds of faux finishes and products and crackle paint, and there's something going on out there, and different things that you can experience and touch, and it's multi-sensory. So paint stores are fantastic ways to create sidewalk dialogue and interesting things going on. So create the Auburn Avenue Extreme Makeover Team. The city has design assistants, so they'll sit down and hire an architect to come in and help you pick 3 colors or 4 colors. It's hard to pick 4 colors that go together on a building that look good, which is why you asked the question and why a lot of buildings end up beige, because it's easy, right? It all goes together, tan. And so the city can help you with picking out those colors, and you guys can form an Auburn Avenue, extreme makeover team, and you can get together and pitch in on a weekend and paint a building and make it look great, and kind of move around. So a lot of the cosmetic stuff you guys could work on together, and it's fun. It's really fun to transform a building. And again, like I said, demonstration paint wall. So the homeless problem and the crime and the activity, just these little things happening here and there where I have people outside doing stuff and investing. And it takes time, but what I try to do with illicit activity is just make it so that people would rather be somewhere else. And the best way to do that is with activity. Any other questions? Well, thank you. This has been really fun. I've had a total ball.